So hi everyone, I'm Daniel Muñoz. Today I'll present our TVCG paper, which is called User Articulated Associations in VR, co-occurrence network map of presence, realism, agency, and time. So our high level idea here is very simple. VR generally or often measures constructs like presence or agency in isolation. But when people actually talk about their experience, these constructs come as bundles. So we propose a way to make those bundles visible and comparable. So in terms of motivation and why language or user language matters, VR experiences are multisensory, embodied, and spatial. They engage not just vision, but also proprioception, kinesthesia, and affect. And at the same time, language is linear and symbolic, so it's not great at capturing pre-reflective sensations like my body felt aligned, or time disappeared, or the world responded. But in practice, first person accounts remain or are still one of the few scalable ways to access to VR phenomenology across many users and many experiences. And importantly, what people choose and describe signals or shows what's salient to them, what is important to them, often shaped by interaction cues, feedback, word coherence, and narrative framing. So in this work, we treat qualitative data not just as anecdote, but as structured evidence about user or about how users organize VR experience, and we quantify that structure. So if we look at the constructs more frequently measured in VR, presence, immersion, realism, agency, narrative comprehension, most studies use standardized scales and analyze constructs separately or maybe in pairs. That shows a gap that we rarely know how users themselves connect constructs during real play. For example, do users spontaneously link embodiment with presence or agency with realism? Does visual realism, for example, actually show up in the present talk or in the present explanation of a user experience? Or does appear more into the fictionality or in the art style uh, within their experiences? So we want a participant level picture of these connections grounded in real gameplay. Then we ask whether a normalized participant level co-occurrence analysis reveals a interpretable cross-construct associations that are not captured, or they are not get by those solo construct scales. So here we ask as research questions. The first one directed to the method. So does normalized participant co-occurrence approach reveal stable interpretable associations among core constructs articulated by users in VR gameplay, as well as what kinds of association structure emerges among nine constructs, such as presence, visual realism, fictionality, etc. So here, a key point up front is that these associations are descriptive and they are balance agnostic. So they do not demonstrate a causality. So we map this co-articulation. Now, in terms of the study of the paper, we ran workshops with around 57 design trained participants, mostly in the creative field, UX, interaction design, industrial design, and related creative fields. We intentionally recruit these design training participants because the qualitative ACI, they are often better able to articulate subtle experiential differences like coherent breaks, guidance, and embodied contingencies, especially in open-ended writing. Now, participants played two commercial VR games. One is a Fisherman Tale, and the second one is Moss. Fisherman Tale is this room scale puzzle, playful and sometimes reality bending, but it has very coherent interactive rules. And then Moss is a third person reader perspective game with strong narrative scaffolding and guidance to narration, and has a lot of environmental cues. And this pair gives some sort of diversity in embodiment, perspective, guide, and narrative framing. So they manifest these constructs that we are looking, they express later on in skills. Now, participants also, after each play, they play a segment and then immediately went to write their responses. So after each gameplay, uh, they go back to their station, to workstation, and then they fill in our worksheets with the skills and the questionnaires, and then continuously back to the next game. In terms of skills, we apply this open-ended questionnaire that mapped constructs. Instead of using only standardized skills, as we mentioned before, we use a structured questionnaire of 19 questions, operationalizing 9 constructs. For instance, for example, presence, do you feel you were there in that place? Physical realism, does it feel real and why? Visual realism, does it look real and why? We're very interested in the reasoning and the whys behind of those sensations, and agency are the events triggered by you. Temporal structure, for example, we ask if the events are chronological, achronological, and the perceived time passage along the experience, and so on. So this instrument gives participants rooms to express nuance, but still anchors responses to theory-backed constructs. So for analysis, we use codebook style thematic analysis with hybrid deductive and inductive approach, both. Deductively, we use the nine higher order constructs that were defined before from the theory and from our instrument. And then inductively, we refine indicators based on the data. And now to keep coding consistent and transparent, each construct has around 40 to 60 sentence level indicators and concrete textual cues and examples, as you can see in the middle row. And so the corpus of the total of data collection involved 57 worksheets with around 23,000 each words approximately, and with a median of 379 words per participant. So we computed the participant level prevalence. Here, a construct is present, or a construct is considered into the theme if a participant mentioned it at least as once. So the prevalence pattern is interested on its own, because we could see that, for example, narrative comprehension and fictionality were at the ceiling of 100%, mentioned by all participants, and then temporal structure was around 95%, attentional cues 90%, and then visual realism, embodiment, and physical realism, agency, and presence appear about 68% of participant accounts. So even before we show the associations, you see what people naturally talk about after the play. Next, we quantify how the constructs travel together. We build a Python pipeline that binarizes each construct per participant. So here, this pipeline computes pairwise co-occurrence using Jacquard similarity, calculating J intersection B divided by J by A union B. Okay? So the ceiling of the constructs don't automatically dominate through row overlap. So then we add uncertainty baseline. We use bootstrap on 95% of confidence intervals with 5,000 resample once one-sided permutation test and 50,000 permutations. And we also add Benjamin-Hornberg FDR correction across all pairs. Again, we treat these metrics as effect sizes, but with uncertainty not as a causal claims. So here, the Python pipeline takes the qualitative data in CSV file. We input the themes that we get inductively and deductively, and then we apply the dictionaries and conceptual definitions of examples, and then we get these outputs as Jacquard matrix, the key pairs, prevalence, and most importantly, the diagram network. Now, the main results show that presence co-occurred, for example, most strongly with attentional guidance and embodiment. and then with temporal structure. And so in participants' own language, feeling there was most tightly tied with layered guidance, like highlights, narration, lighting framing, and self-representation. Hands, for example, or mirrors. Presence was associated also with visual realism, but less with physical realism and agency. Now, that pattern supports coherence over fidelity interpretation. Users often report strong presence in stylized worlds when interaction feedback and world rules are very coherent within the world. A typical account is essentially, so for example, they say it's cartoony, but it responds correctly. The sound and actions match, and I feel there. Those are some examples that we can see on the quote. And we also saw that what we call design side cluster. For example, visual realism strongly co-occur with temporal structure and attentional cues, as well as physical realism, for example, co-occur strongly with cues and temporal structure. Now, this can be interpreted as when participants discuss visuals and physics, they often did it in the same discourse, and as pacing and guidance, how events unfold and how the experience signals what matters next. And another nuance, for example, visual realism cluster mode with fictionality and narrative talk with presence, meaning how it looks. It frequently discussed as a style and world fiction, but not necessarily as a driver of place illusion. So we translate this pattern into four actionable design heuristics and prioritize coherence over fidelity, for example, aim for consistent physics, interaction rules, and narrative logic, as well as layered guidance to sustain agency. Here, the agency narrative cues patterns align with design theory and signifier feedback and feed forward, use multimodal and preferably diegetic cues to guide player without breaking immersion, which is very important. And then leverage partial embodiment, even minimal synchronous embodiment, track hands, mirrors can strengthen self-location and presence as long as these visual motor contingencies remain consistent, right? And make time legible through events. For example, temporal experience in VR is often event-driven. And anchor times shifts to salient narrative or environmental events like sound marks, scene transitions, sunrise cues. So pacing feels coherent rather than confusing. To wrap up, our contribution is both methodological and substantive. Methodologically, we offer a participant level normalized co-occurrence map that makes qualitative associations inspectable, comparable, and using effect sizes with uncertainty, complementing traditional scales. And substantially across these commercial VR games, users also accounts suggested that presence is more closely scaffolded by attentional guidance and embodiment more than visual fidelity, and that realism talk often appears alongside pacing and signposting, while fictionality is accepted when false logic is coherent. So that will be all I have to say. Thank you so much for attention and interest in our work.